So good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday to you all. I hope you are all doing well. Thank you for being here today. Just so you know, you have registered and are currently in the Social Business Plan Workshop, which is part of the FPU Center for Community Transformation. My name is Carlos Huerta. I do serve at the center as our Associate Director and have done so for the last 6 years. Just so you know, again, business plan workshop here. Our goal today is to understand what you need to apply for Spark Tank 2022. Spark Tank is in its 9th year of investing startup capital in social entrepreneurial ideas within the Central Valley. Again, we mentioned that this funding is for Central Valley, communities between Bakersfield and Merced. However, part of our process here is not just to understand Spark Tank, but also understand in general how to build your social business. And so if you do not end up applying for Spark Tank this year, maybe you will do so in the future, but at the very least, you will walk away with the competent and confidence, hopefully, to continue your social entrepreneurial idea. So again, that our hope here is that you walk away with tools to launch more social enterprises within the Central Valley. So why do we as a center focus on social entrepreneurship? You'll often hear me say that our goal is to invest in community members solving community problems through business. In reality, Fresno ends up at the top of many lists. They're not always the best list. And well, part of our thinking is that if we continue to do the same, we'll end up with more of the same. And so we really encourage innovation and new ideas to tackle some of our largest community problems. In this process, we do see business as vital to community well-being and transformation. The reality is most times when people identify problems in our community, their initial idea is to start another nonprofit. However, our value proposition is understanding in some of the research across the country where charitable contribution has not moved between 9 and 11% since the 1920s, thanks to research from the Pew Institute, is that your new nonprofit is competing with other churches, other nonprofits, foundations, and the such for this ethereal 10% in community. And so our encouragement is to tap into the other 90% in the marketplace and find business solutions to tackle some of our biggest problems in our community. The other reality on why we choose to raise capital and invest it in startups is that startup capital is expensive in general or does not exist. And for us, we have found it even more difficult for social businesses to acquire startup capital. And at the end of the day, part of our hope is to reduce the risk that you or your institution may take on in starting a business. And at the end of the day, increase equity and opportunity for folks to start businesses. Just so you know, this is the second workshop of the Social Business Plan Workshop. It is the same one that we did do on January 25th and that we did in the evening, but now we're doing this for a daytime crowd today. Just so you all know, our deadline to submit for Spark Tank, you will find our website and we will email this to you after our workshop today, is February 23rd by 5 p.m. A couple things to note there. One, again, we do need your application to be submitted by 5 p.m. on February 23rd, and you will receive notification whether you were accepted or not into the pitch at Spark Tank by March 4th, and pitch day is March 15th. Three things that my screen just says that my participants can now barely see my screen. Have you all been able to see my slides before this? Can someone give me a confirmation or thumbs up?
Okay. I see where it says social enterprise calendar and that's it.
Okay, that should be it just gave me notification that my slides just started sharing. So I'm glad we're all tracking here. And then final thing I would note here is that judges are looking against a rubric for 3 categories: sustainability, impact, and innovation. So keep that in mind. And I'll explain those in the process here. So where we're headed today, 3 things we want to accomplish. Why social enterprise and what is it? How do you build a social enterprise and how to apply for Spark Tank? So let's dive into this today. Let's go ahead and define what social enterprise is and why should I care? In our in our spheres here, we really do identify big problems in our community. And we want to tackle those from the streets in our neighborhood to the planet as a whole. Again, we see that big problems affect people we care about. And whether it's your faith tradition calling you to care about this, or whether you know someone who's facing this big problem, or perhaps you yourself are facing this problem, you want to address it and do something about it. And so our hope here is that you grow as big as you need to in order to address the size of the problem so that you can make money and keep going. Simple terms. And part of why we use these terms is we try to limit the amount of business jargon that we may use in this process. But at the same time, we hope you will acquire it along the way. So what is social enterprise? We believe that social enterprise is a business that exists to solve a social or environmental problem. There are two parts here: social, environmental problem, and business. On one end, there is an impact goal, which is the mission and purpose of the business. And then there's the business goal. So you could say, well, a lot of businesses have a mission statement. So what's the difference? And again, we come back to, there's something that separates social enterprises, and is that they exist because of the problem they are trying to solve. And most of the time, the problem is their North Star versus more money. And so everything they do is geared around that specific social impact or environmental impact goal. But again, a reminder to all social entrepreneurs that the better you are at both making money and having an impact, again, the more impact you will be able to have in community. So let's talk about these really quick. Impact and business are both given energy and focus. You want to set goals, measure progress, and make improvements. The reality, though, is that sometimes business and impact could be seen like oil and water. It could be like a tug of war. I sometimes say it's like an oxymoron, like saying jumbo shrimp. They don't always line up well together, just because of our understanding of what business is and what doing good for community could be. Yeah, but truly, we feel like entrepreneurs are best equipped, are the most well equipped to solve problems in the world they care about in a profitable and sustainable way. So there are a couple types of social enterprises that I want to mention just when we talk about models here, excuse me. The first is an embedded model. This is where your product or service solves the problem. In simple terms, we'll say that you're a farmer and you grow vegetables. The vegetable itself solves the problem, probably by someone eating it. Maybe they're lacking certain nutrients and your vegetable provides that nutrient that they need. The next one is an integrated business model. And this is how you run your business. How you grow the vegetable and who you hire solves a problem in this process. Over the years, this has been a growing category in our spheres and across the country, where people build businesses, social businesses, to hire people with barriers to employment. And so this is where many models fall into this integrated type of model. So again, what solves the problem is how you grow the vegetable or who you hire to pick the vegetable. And I'll share some tangible examples that exist here in our Central Valley. And then finally, there's the external or give back model, where you're using your sales and profits from growing and selling the vegetables to solve the problem. So in the farmer example, you take the money left over from your sales and you use those profits to solve problems. Maybe you donate money to a school, maybe you buy books for kids. Again, I'll give you all examples of what this is so far. So the first example I want to mention of an embedded model is going to be Community Music School here at Fresno Pacific University. Part of what Eric and Sheena Leung found in building this social enterprise idea was that local students had little access to music and after school programs. What they found is that most folks that actually received any kind of college scholarship for music programs, any of those that performed at a high level, came from mostly affluent parts of the country, especially affluent parts of our Central Valley. And as music directors at a local university, they actually were judging competitions. And as they started to talk to parents and to students, they realized that the biggest problem here was access to private music lessons. However, low to moderate income families cannot afford private music lessons. And so they wanted to bridge that gap. And so originally they felt like, okay, maybe the low to moderate income families will pay for the services. But again, the biggest problem here was they can't necessarily afford these services. But what they did realize is that school districts had money designated for after school programs. And so on one end, they solved the access to private music lessons for students in low to moderate income populations. But the people that paid for this service were school districts through their after school 21st century grants and funding. And so again, this is the example of an embedded model. Next up is neighborhood industries, specifically neighborhood thrift in the Tower District here in Fresno, California. The impact problem is that they found that a lot of the residents in the Tower District needed some type of job or employment experience opportunity. And again, a lot of these folks had been out of work, oftentimes on public assistance, and they wanted to transition them from there. Some were coming out of homelessness, some were coming out of rehab, and again, they had a large gap on their work history, and so they wanted to provide opportunities for folks. So the business problem on their thrift store is that residents of the Tower District need new clothes or other household items, but can't afford brand new prices, right? So a secondhand thrift store. And so neighborhood thrifts hires anywhere from 30 to 40 people on a full-time basis throughout the year to support their operations. And this is an example of an integrated model because of the workforce they are hiring in the process. You could also make the point that they are recycling and reducing landfill waste, something that they do track as well, because their goal is also to reduce waste in the community. And then finally, Lana Coffee Company here in downtown Fresno. Their impact problem was that they realized that certain villages in Thailand needed access to clean water. They also had an economy that was very dependent on opium. However, the shalom of their communities was being destroyed, where gangs would often come raid their opium supplies and take family members away, never to be seen again. And so that was a very core and big problem in Thailand. And so what they wanted to do was actually create clean water wells for them instead of having to have families walk, out a couple miles to their cleanest water well nearby. They saw this as a basic human necessity. On the other end, they realized that coffee shops, restaurants, and retailers want local quality coffee. And so what Lana does is buy the green coffee beans from the village in Thailand, and then they roast them and then sell them here locally. And on the impact side, for what it's worth, in 2019, the water wells that they built with the profits will provide 7 million gallons of clean water over the next 20 years for the hill tribes in Thailand, which is so exciting to know even about those impact metrics. And finally, I would say this is an external model, right? And so you may say some companies sometimes donate money. And oftentimes that's if they are profitable or not that quarter. Lana specifically says every sale we make is going to donate 25% of the profits to creating clean water wells. And their push is the more coffee we sell, the more clean water we can create. And so there is a little bit of a distinguishment here that we would make between maybe a tithing company and someone like Lana Coffee Company who exists to do this kind of work. Couple notes here. Differences between the two. A nonprofit, as we've talked about, usually relies on donors and grants, where a social enterprise is looking at customers and revenue streams or a stream. And so again, I come back to this 90-10% that we ethereally talk about. One thing I will note that I didn't mention at the beginning of this workshop is that I will be sharing these slides with all of you. So if you're like feverishly trying to take down every single note, I will share this slide deck with you. Social enterprise and traditional business, I also want to distinguish this too, as I have at the beginning here, but traditional business exists to make money, and that's their primary goal, profit at all cost. Impact isn't necessarily built into that business model. Whereas in social enterprises, making money is a tool for creating more impact and sustaining operations over the long term. Again, impact is integrated into the core of the business model. And the goal here is to both measure and manage for this impact and for economic growth. And ultimately, the inspiration for existing is solving a problem in the world. I do want to note that we will say we are big fans of business, and that's why we lean into social business. And so we say there's nothing inherently wrong with making money and just stopping there. However, you're likely in that process to provide a job and provide services for the people that want and those good things. However, at the same time, we do see that social entrepreneurs would likely see this as a missed opportunity to make a difference in the world. And this is why we want to encourage folks to consider this social entrepreneurial model. So you might be asking, why should I even consider a social business? Running a business is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. Why do I want to add an extra bottom line or even a third bottom line to my operations? And so really, we would really encourage you in this process to go big, grow big, make money, and change the world. Or maybe more realistically, is change someone's world in the process. And honestly, like I could end there and just let it be some motivational speech and then charge you $27.99 for the rest of the slides for today. But again, that's not what's most helpful to you. And so I do want to get started on how to build our social enterprises in this process. So how do we get started? I think is a good question to start with. Again, if you ever tried to start a business or specifically a social enterprise, you know how overwhelming it could be figuring everything out about the business idea at once. Some people say, hey, I got to build a website. Others are, I got to write a business plan. And in our experience, a traditional business plan becomes difficult here because you write dozens of pages pretending to know like you know what's going to happen in these assumptions. But we also have found that it's not the most helpful process in the ideation phase when you're trying to make sense of what you're going to do. Business plans are extremely helpful down as you begin to become a small business, but we'd actually encourage you that if you have limited time, resources, and money, to start to employ this process that we'll talk about today. And again, I would say that our goal here would be to take the guesswork out of what it is to start a business, to launch you into that small business phase. So a couple steps here that we'll mention. The first one is find a problem. And so I know most of you are currently muted, or maybe you're watching this a couple years from now down the road, but I want y'all to read these out loud with me as I read these out loud. But step one, and we'll all together say, find a problem. Step two, talk to customers. Step three, brainstorm solutions. Step four, build an MVP. Step five, improve your MVP. And step six, find more customers. Now, you might notice that the problem comes first and the solution comes later. Problem first, solution later. Their problem first, your solution later. Problem first, solution later. And I might seem kind of ridiculous and redundant here, but I really do want to stress this. I would say maybe no idea how helpful this is and how hard it is for most entrepreneurs to get started. Over the years, we've had many entrepreneurs that come in with fantastic solutions. Don't get me wrong, they are great ideas. They likely could be profitable, but most of the time they don't know what problem they're solving or who the customer they are going to be providing that solution for is. And so they often are stunted working on the wrong things and quickly run out of steam in trying to start their business. And so that's why we say solution building doesn't happen until step three, even though you might already have a solution in mind. The other thing you might ask is like, what the heck is an MVP, most valuable player, right? Why am I bringing LeBron James into this conversation? Actually, in startup lingo and in a business world, MVP stands for minimum viable product. And I'll explain what that is here shortly, but essentially it's basically the simplest thing you can build to solve your customer's problem. And the cool thing about this is that the MVP is the best way to get started and for you to learn about your customer's problem that you are solving, that you are trying to solve. Our biggest push in this phase, as you're building your social business, is to fail fast, fail small, and fail forward. figured out what works and what doesn't work before you scale too quickly or too large, where it's too costly or too time consuming to overhaul what you're trying to do here. And so again, that's why step one for us is find a problem, because it is so foundational for the whole process, and it takes a whole lot of guesswork and becomes second nature. And it is also a step in SparkTank, in the SparkTank application process, that has the most questions. And over the years, we have found that that is the hardest set of questions for folks to think about when they are still in the idea phase. So we do have, today's the 9th, 24th, what do we have, 14 days until applications are due. So you have some resources here to hopefully get you started on that process. So step one, let's start with find a problem. We start here, and again, start with finding the problem that someone has. If you came here with an idea for a social business, let's take a second to think about that idea. Where did that idea come from? What inspired it? And I would say it was inspired by a problem that you see someone has. Maybe it's a problem you have or that you see in your community. And so if you can think of a problem that your idea solves right now, no problem. Let's keep going. And the connection, no, excuse me, if you can't think of a problem that your idea solves, that's no problem. Let's keep going, and maybe the connections will form here. So before we go any further though, we're going to keep talking about problems, but what is a problem, right? So let's maybe identify this so it helps us all understand and have common language here. So the first point here is that a problem is usually a pain point, a frustration, or a difficult. Usually it's focused on someone's friction, and again, we're focusing on that friction to provide relief or a solution to that down the road. Oftentimes you start to hear from customers or potential customers in this process, I wish that this was better. My life would be better if blank. You know what? This situation in the world just is not right. These are often key phrases that we hear used when people talk about their problems. And then on a bigger scale, we see injustice, inequality, and oppression as some of the biggest problems in our communities. And so again, but these are the more severe and larger problems that are often umbrella problems in our community. Now, I would say to provide a bit more clarity, here are some examples. I have so many things to do every day. I can't keep track of them all, so I end up forgetting all of them or some of them. It's actually a pretty big problem that I have here. Or I want to eat healthy, but I don't have enough time for that. In community, we often hear, I have a record, I have a felony, and no one is willing to hire me. Or in the example of Lana Coffee Company, I can't drink the tap water in my neighborhood because it's so polluted and toxic. Those are all real problems that we've seen folks face in our social business plan workshops and over the years. So I would say, let's take a quick second. Let's take a minute and think about this, but I'm going to ask you to use your chat box function and actually post in the chat what you think the problem your social business is going to address. Let's take a minute to do that.
Do we write them in the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Post a problem you believe you are solving in the chat. And as someone who teaches at a university, I don't mind this awkward pause until we start seeing some activity here. All right, I see them plugging in here. So Andrea says, lack of help and support for laboring and postpartum mothers and their family. Absolutely. Rokmini says addresses the learning needs of young learners that need an alternative type of learning community that allows for more creativity and freedom to choose their path. Fantastic. Gatsby says the business should be addressing Central Valley local businesses of higher prices for transportation or limited transportations. Cornelius says provide access to knowledge, accountability, and investment capital for social entrepreneurs. Christine says, I want to connect young talent seeking professional mentors in a lab environment that will assist nonprofits with various human resource needs on project by project basis. Fantastic. And I love to see the creativity of everybody in this workshop, and feel free to keep posting these problems that you're trying to solve in the chat. But thank you for your interaction here today. And I would encourage you, if that you see an idea that you're interested in throughout this process, don't hesitate to, private chat with somebody on our call today and start connecting today. We really do believe in the power of networking in everything we do. And then Julie says, dignified jobs for our neighbors who have been previously experiencing homelessness. Fantastic. Let's go to continue here. So I will take a quick pause here to talk about problems, because we do identify two types of problems in social enterprises. And there are two types of problems that we're trying to solve. There is an impact problem, and then there is a business problem. As I mentioned in the models before, some models solve both of these at the same time. Some of these solve them along the way, and some of these use business to support the impact problem in the process. Again, social environmental impact that you're trying to solve or address is your cause. It's your North Star. It feels like the heart, the mission, or the purpose of your business. And it often is a rallying point for your team to remember why you're doing the work that you're doing. And on the business side, it's a pain point, a business pain point. Someone pays you to solve their problem. It is the engine that keeps you going. You make money so you can stay alive and grow, sustain, maintain, and flourish over time. We actually have a phrase that we use here at the center. We often say, if there's no money, there's no mission, right? If there's no margin, there's no mission in the process. And if there's more money, there's actually more mission along the way. And so it gets funny after you say it a couple hundred times, but it really is true. In social entrepreneurship, growing sales grows your impact. And we really do want to stress that here. So again, going back to our two main problems here, beneficiary is who is being served through the impact process, and the customer is who's being served through the business process. And so we do want to make that distinguishment, because we hope it will be helpful to you to understand who you're building this for. I say that because the beneficiary is who's benefiting from the problem that you are solving, and the customer who's paying you for it. You saw the example of community music schools. Students in the music program are the beneficiary, but the customer is a school district. My favorite example usually to use here is, think of a daycare center where the beneficiary is the child, my 2-year-old son, and the customer is me. But if the daycare center spent most of their time marketing and messaging to my 2-year-old, that might look a lot different than what it looked like than what it may be to me. I care about safety. I want to make sure he's fed and changed throughout the day when he does have to go to daycare. If you ask Mateo what he wants, he probably wants more superhero toys and more chocolate milk, and that's what they're going to use in their marketing and messaging. And so it does change the way we talk to our customers here. In the same way that community music school realize, we don't need to be talking to the families and students that we'll be serving. We need to talk to school districts. Next step is actually something I personally use. And this one is actually solved. The beneficiary and the customer are the same person. I don't know about y'all, but I have a really tough time slowing down and creating space for me to meditate and such. And I found that Headspace is actually a very helpful app for this, where it forces me to slow down. And I pay a subscription fee. Yes, I pay a subscription fee to somebody to help me stop doing stuff at $11.99 a month. But this is a big problem for me, and I realize I need that reflective time. And so I am both the beneficiary and customer of the Headspace app. So let's come back to this problem. And I know it feels like, hey, Carlos, we're like 30 minutes into this workshop and you're still talking about problem. Again, I'm choosing to spend some of this time in problem because these are actually where you're going to find the most questions on our Spark Tank application for. So how do you find a problem, right? How do you make sure you have actually found a problem in your community? So on one end, you're trying to scratch your own itch. It's a personal experience. Like, hey, I want to build a machine to put on my socks because I really don't like bending over and putting my socks on in the morning, right? Like that's a pretty small pain for me. But I use that as a lighthearted example because we did have an entrepreneur years ago who realized, people with disabilities have trouble putting on their socks. And so a machine to put on socks actually is helpful for them. And so helpful for me, it's more like an inconvenience, but for others, it actually does change the quality of life that they will experience along the way. The next one is the world around you, your work, you're listening to others, you're keeping your eyes open for the problems that exist along the way. And then finally, I would say empathy goes a long way in how you step into the shoes of someone else so that you understand and feel their pain points. And if you can't do that, I would say it's hard to build something for them that will actually solve their problem. We do have on one end a process for how do you find the right problem? How do you know this is a problem where you can make money? How do you know this problem is the right one for you and your team? And we find that these questions for your founding team are really helpful in the early goings of your process here. So on one end, how do you find the right problem? Self-awareness and empathy really would be the first step. In this part of your journey, again, self-awareness can help you find the problem that tears at your heart or that makes you more excited about what you want to do. So you may ask yourself, do I genuinely care about both of these problems I'm trying to solve? And remember, business problem, impact problem. And then empathy being a key for life, but especially in entrepreneurs that allow us to step in the shoes of our customers and beneficiaries along the way. Next up, I would say hair on fire is something that venture capital and angel investors often talk about. And for some of you, maybe venture capitalism or angel investment is what you're aiming for down the road. And so most of the time you'll hear them talk about finding a customer whose hair is on fire, that their problem is so intense that no matter what I handed to them, whether it's a prick or a backpack, they'll use that to try to put out the fire in their hair. Now it's a ridiculous metaphor sometimes, but sometimes that's actually what's happening in community. People are still solving their problems in some way, but it's not always the best way. And so how could we do that better? And so with the example of hair on fire, you're trying to find the next bucket of water to put out that fire. You will actually hear us also talk about this concept of candy versus aspirin, or aspirin versus ice cream, where aspirin will always outsell ice cream in the marketplace because people choose to suppress their pain versus pursue pleasure. And now, this isn't to say that ice cream wouldn't sell well, because it does. Look at Ben and Jerry's, for example. However, most of the time, they're trying to address pain points in people's lives. And so they understand that a lot better than the pleasure that people are trying to pursue. So something to keep in mind along the way. And then finally, how do you know? So I would say there is a set of questions that we pull from Michael Seibel and Eric Ries. Michael Seibel being the founder and CEO of Y Combinator, and then Eric Ries, who is the author of The Lean Startup. Again, coming back to understanding whether the problem is worth solving. We have a list of questions here that may be helpful to you. I often say focus on the first 4, specifically the first 2, when you're starting to talk to people and starting to understand their problem. How intense is my customer's problem? And how often does my customer have this problem? Because that'll actually help you along the way in understanding how many times do I need to solve this problem? Or can I build a solution to solve this problem this many times? And then again, intensity will actually help you understand whether the customer is really trying to pay for this or not. Again, I'm probably not going to pay for that sock machine, but a family whose family member does experience a disability would pay for that sock machine. And so again, I use that as an example for the intensity of a problem. Do my customers know that they have this problem I'm trying to solve? Sometimes customers don't realize that their hair is on fire, or they might have a different problem that they're facing. How many people have this problem? Again, this is maybe back to a market-based question, is how big is the market for the problem and the solution I'm trying to provide here? And again, this is a great mental checklist to run through any idea that you may have. And so on the back end here on problem solving, now you jump into the next 4 questions. The fifth one being, are they willing to pay me to solve this problem? Have I experienced the problem myself? And if not, am I close to anyone who has experienced it? Question 7 here on this list is, can I build a solution to that problem? And finally, how easy is it for me to find my customers and for them to find me? And so over time, we would encourage you to run through these 8 questions for both the impact and the business problem that you land on. I will note just quickly here that the problems you choose don't have to be problems that no one else has ever solved before. Oftentimes there are imitators, replications, whatever you want to call them in the marketplace. It doesn't even have to be original. You just have to make sure that you're focused on their problem as you're improving your product, figuring out marketing and sales language and other aspects of building your company. And so if you're maybe more focused on their problem than other potential solutions that they can go with, that significantly increases your chances that they'll want something from you than the competitors that they're currently buying from, or other aspects that you may include. And so all that to say is about 40 minutes in, let's jump into SparkTank application questions. Just so you know what SparkTank is looking for, now that you have an idea of what kind of the idea is of asking these questions and where we're going with these. And again, I will note all these slides I will be sharing with you today, as well as the recording of the video. You also will receive a copy of the actual application that you will submit in written form through the SparkTank process. So first question here, simple question. Why are you starting this business? We actually have a great way to phrase this question 3 different ways. And I'd actually ask it to you 3 different times. Why are you starting the business? Focus on the why. Why are you, Cornelius Williams, starting this business? And then why are you starting this business? Right? And again, same question, just 3 different ways. What are your motivations? Why are you compelled to do this when you could be doing anything else in the world, or quite frankly, nothing at all? And so what are you hoping to gain from this? And so again, tell us about why you're doing this and why you'll keep doing it when things get hard, because it's not always smooth sailing in the entrepreneurship world. Next question here is, what is your vision for your business? What do you see this social enterprise doing? Where do you see this social enterprise going? Where do you see yourself going in this social enterprise? And if your social enterprise were to grow to your wildest dreams, what would that look like? And what impact would you accomplish along the way? Third question here on the application process, what problem are you solving for your customer, and why does your customer want to buy this? Now here we're focusing in on the business problem, not as much as the impact problem on this question. We'd really ask you to be as specific as possible. Remember, we want to narrow in on a specific business problem. I would encourage you to use as many adjectives and specific nouns as you can, enough so that we clearly understand the problem that you're solving and what it would feel like, even if you never actually have experienced that problem before. Something I'll note is that we do have a panel of judges who will be looking at these applications from seasoned practitioners of social enterprise who are business owners and managers, as well as professors from local universities. And so we do have a good mix of eyes that will be looking at these proposals. I myself will not be in the judging of the proposals. I do know some of you, and so we try to remove the subjective nature of this process and put it in the hands of the judges. And this is why I say, I might know your idea and problem, but the judges do not. And so help them better understand what it is you're trying to accomplish along the way. Next question here is, what social environmental problem are you solving? This is our fourth question here. This is your impact problem. Again, just like the business problem, be as specific as you can and narrow in on a specific impact problem. Get those adjectives and specific nouns in there. I would say make it so that the judges know what it is to feel that problem, even again, if you or them have never experienced that before. This is more of a why question, saying, why did you choose this social environmental problem? Have you experienced it yourself? One thing we've noticed is proximity is key to sustainability of the entrepreneur. And so if this is a problem that plagues you or someone in your immediate network, then again, you're more than likely to continue on in this venture than pulling the plug, as we've seen over the years. Next question here. What from your experience and background has prepared you to start this social enterprise? And this isn't always like, hey, I have a business degree from this fancy university. It's actually more like a lived experience. I feel like this is probably our most interviewee question along the way, but this really builds on the last question is, do you have the skills and experience necessary to contribute your fair portion to the business? And so if you're going to be responsible for selling things, have you ever sold anything before? If you are going to be responsible for the finances, have you at least kept books? Again, tell us about the skills and experience you have that have prepared you to do this. And in addition to that, you may have some personal experience or turning point in your life that created a burning passion for you to want to pursue this idea. And so if you haven't quite addressed that in other questions, this is where we want to know about that passion that burns inside of you. So again, experience and background that has prepared you to start the social enterprise. And the final question here in this section is, if there is anyone else on your founding team, tell us about them and their role in this company, in your social business. And so again, now that you know, now that we've gotten to know you in the last question, we want to know about any other co-founders that might be on your team. What do they bring to the table that you don't already have? Why does having them on board make it more likely that your business will succeed and that you will solve impact and business problems? I would say that these are not people who cheer you on from the sidelines, right? But they're actually people who have agreed to help you from time to time, someone that will pick up the phone and you'll get to bounce ideas off. Maybe they're the salesperson that you're not, that will go out and talk to people about the product and service that you're going to be providing. They may put in similar hours to you. They might deserve some of the equity of the company you're about to build. And if you don't know what equity ownership is, that's totally okay. We can always talk about that at another time. But I just throw out some ideas here when you start thinking about who is on my co-founding team. And so all that to say is, this is the first section on the Spark Tank process. One thing I will note is we're not looking for like a 10-page application. I feel like Blaise Pascal and the Lettres Provinciales said it best, and a loose translation saying, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter, right? And so we're not looking for this super long application. There are some suggested length on every one of these questions. And so again, on any given year, we might see anywhere up to 40 proposals for the Spark Tank process. And so helping our judges really understand your idea concisely and clearly is helpful along the way. So again, there are suggested lengths for responses on each of these questions on the application process. All right. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. We are 45 minutes into this presentation. What I'm actually going to ask everyone to do is go ahead and turn off your screens really quick. I'm just going to ask you, close your eyes and take a deep breath. Carlos just pumped a bunch of information into me. And stretch. One more deep breath. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and turn on your screen again. Again, there's a lot of information that we're covering today. I want to make sure that you're in it with us until about the 12 o'clock hour here. So let me go ahead and share my screen again, and we're going to jump into step 2 of building your social business. Again, my hope here is that you are looking at both the SparkTank application process, but also gleaning some practical tools and resources here in this ideation phase that you have here. So let's jump back into step 2, and these will actually go by a lot faster, I promise, than that first section that was a little bit longer than the rest of these. So let's start talking about customers and beneficiaries and the problems that they have here. So what's the best way to talk to customers or beneficiaries? And what is important to figure out? I would note here that you only want to talk to people who have the problem. I often have entrepreneurs that come into class and they say, my mom said this was the best idea she's ever heard of. And I say, well, it's probably because it's your mom and she's going to tell you that anyway, or their aunt or their sister, whoever it is. And so, but they're probably not going to be buying your stuff. And so when you're looking at the impact problem here or the business problem, talk to people who have that specific problem. And I would say that the only exception here to maybe someone who doesn't have this problem is someone who's like an expert in this area, like a social service worker serving low-income families, a therapist who has served people experiencing trauma over the years. They might intimately understand that problem as well as the person facing that problem. But I would say you absolutely need to hear about the problem for the people who experience it firsthand. I would encourage you to do more listening and less talking. Actually, what I'll do is I'll include in the email that I sent to everyone just a quick video that I really enjoy of how to talk to customers in this process. And then we'll explain this a little bit more, but in this discovery process, your goal isn't to say, okay, will you buy this for me? Right? Your goal is actually to learn more about the problem that you're trying to solve and use that to inform what you're going to build. And really encourage these conversations, these questions to be more broad and open-ended, excuse me. This is because you want them to lead you to their most intense problem in this area. And so again, only focus in on questions that lead you and that help you become more interested in the specific items that they may be bringing up here. And then again, follow them as they lead you to the problem. Never lead with the solution that you think you're going to provide. Again, you're trying to get to the heart of what their problem is along the way. And remember, your solution is your current best idea to solve the problem, but the foundation is their problem, right? And that may change. Your assumptions may change over time, depending on the severity or the frequency of the problem that they share with you. But again, the main goal here is learning about the problem. We did put together a list of 5 questions from Heaton Shaw and Eric Mijakovsky here that we've seen to be super helpful in this discovery phase. But the first 2 questions, the first one here is, what is your number one challenge around finding healthy food in your community? What is your number one challenge around finding a job? What is your number one problem around your child's education, right? As using some of your examples here. Next up here is, can you tell me about the last time you had this problem? And again, this is framed to understanding the person having this problem. And I would say there is a narrative around this experience and their experience in the problem. So it's going to be helpful here to really understand a way for you to become the provider of a solution to that problem. But again, you need to hear this from them and not make that assumption. The remaining 3 questions on this list: why was this hard? Have you tried anything to solve this problem? And then my favorite one on this list is actually, what don't you love about the solutions you've tried? Because they're actually going to give you, a pot of gold that they're dropping on your lap to say how you could do this better, right? And how you can provide an important solution. I would say that these aren't as pivotal as the first 2 questions, but they're very helpful. But again, the fifth question is probably my favorite question on this list. And in a way, consider it a to-do list that they just handed you on the things that they want. All right, so in talking to customers, after you ask your questions, keep digging into that. Don't be so stuck on your list of questions that you forget to follow where they lead you in this conversation. Try to learn more about the problem. Don't offer your solution yet. Again, the goal here is to fall in love with the problem and not your solution. You may hear us say sometimes, and I will note that this is not life advice, but we say, date your ideas, don't marry them, right? Because as soon as there's a better idea that comes up, you want to ditch the one that you have. Again, not life advice, business advice here. Date your idea, don't marry them. Because we have found entrepreneurs over the years who are really married to the idea that they started with, and they are unable to change and adapt to what the marketplace says or to what their customers are demanding from them. And so again, we want to focus on the problem here. And then finally, these conversations around their number one challenge tell you what their biggest pain point is here. And again, they are handing you what their problem is and what you should be specifically doing to help solve this problem. And the more conversations you have, the more things you didn't expect might become clearer. And again, if one person out of 20 tells you this is their problem, well, then it might not be a frequent enough problem to focus on. But if 15 or 20 of them are, then you might have some traction there. And so next up, I do have a few more SparkTank application questions that I want to tie into this section here. The first is describing your target or typical customer. Again, after you've had a few conversations with the people who have this problem, it should be pretty easy to tell us about the typical customer you're targeting for your business problem. What common characteristics do they share? Do they have similar interests? Do they have certain job titles? Do they work at certain types of organizations? Also, why is this a problem for them? And why do they want this to be solved? So we want you to show us that you have a good understanding of who you are trying to sell your product or service to. Next up, similar category, but now focusing on target or typical beneficiary. So same things apply to the first question as they do for this one. And then finally, do you have any competitors? Are there other similar businesses that are solving a similar problem? If yes, tell us about them and how you will still be able to thrive regardless. Something to note here, I would say that the third question here is definitely not the most important thing you'll find out of these customer conversations or what you want to spend your time on, but you may learn of some alternative solutions along the way. And keep in mind that when you're looking for competitors, they don't just look at companies doing the exact same thing you're doing. And I'll mention like a t-shirt printing company, right? Like you might say in the city of Carruthers, which is my hometown, there's no other t-shirt printing companies, right? And so I feel like I have no competitors whatsoever. But in reality, people are buying clothing to wear. People are trying to convey messages. And so maybe Walmart in Selma is my actual biggest competitor because they also sell clothing. Or there's a boutique store that also sells clothing that instead of paying me $30 for a personalized shirt, they might just go pay $9.99 at the local boutique for another t-shirt, right? So again, there are both indirect and direct competitors along the way. If we had more time, I would dive into that. But just something to keep in mind is that in a way, come back to this hair on fire idea, they are solving that problem in some short or shortcoming way, but not as well as you could. All right, so step 3 here. And again, these last couple steps are pretty quick as we've spent the majority of our times on step 1 and step 2, which we believe is very foundational to this process as we've seen applications over the years, because most folks are coming with solutions already. But the first one is, step 3 is brainstorm solutions. One of my favorite quotes comes from Michael Seibel at Y Combinator. But he says most entrepreneurs think that their genius and special sauce is in their solution. However, he would say that the best entrepreneurs now know that their genius and special sauce is in how deeply they understand their customer's problem. And so this is a huge point being made here. Deeply understanding the problem is the best advantage you can have. And if for those of you who may not know Y Combinator, they are responsible for companies like Airbnb and Stripe. They have the most unicorn companies across the country. So they are the most worldly renowned accelerator program that I'm very fond of, even though they don't focus specifically on social entrepreneurship. Again, they've been able to build many businesses based on this specific point of understanding customers' pain points. So I would say here, how to come up with ideas, couple ideas is look back at your interview notes from your conversations with customers. Sometimes it's helpful to get a whiteboard, some friends and some food and drinks and say, hey, let's brainstorm ideas around how we're going to solve this problem. Again, I'm a communal person, so I like bouncing ideas off of people and enjoying company along the way of solving problems. And so your goal here is to write the specific problem you are trying to solve on the whiteboard and come up with as many ideas as you can, and then choose the idea that you want to date first. Again, business advice, not marriage advice, guys. And then finally, there's something we call a 10-star exercise by Airbnb founder Brian Chesky. I usually just do it up until 6 stars, but you could get extraordinary wild on a 10-star exercise. But if you've ever Yelped before or looked at Google reviews, you know that stars are very important to people choosing that restaurant or that service. And what Brian Chesky encourages is think of in your business what a 1-star experience would be for your client. And then jump to 2 stars, and then 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars, and get to understand how much is it going to cost you to provide a 5-star experience. And if you can't provide that 5-star experience, what needs to change? Or maybe you're okay with providing a 4-star experience at the beginning, but walking through this activity is helpful as you brainstorm solutions on what your resources, time, and energy and money allow you to do. Because show of hands, how many of you have endless time? Right? Probably none of y'all. How many of you have endless money? Endless energy? Endless resources? Right? So if you answered yes to all of those, then I don't think you need this workshop, right? But in reality, I hope that this is a helpful process to you. A couple questions from the Spark Tank application is one, do you have any different ideas for a social enterprise? And this is an optional question, I would note, so you don't necessarily have to answer it, but we're looking at ways that you think about business ideas here. Last year, we did have an entrepreneur that submitted an application for 3 different ideas. She was very motivated to solve this idea. And we gave her feedback and said, you should choose this one because we feel like it has the most momentum behind it. And a year later, there's a lot of momentum behind what she's doing because she figured it out. But she hasn't quite ditched those other 2 ideas that could be ancillary to the work that she's going to do. But again, I mentioned that, again, there's more than one way to solve a problem. And some of our larger problems in our community are a lot more complicated than one solution fits all. And so again, if you have other ideas, we'd love to hear them. And so again, answering yes to this question isn't necessary to scoring well in the Spark Tank application. But again, it may be helpful here. I'll note we did have an entrepreneur a number of years ago, Manisha Edwards of Scent and Fire Candles. She also had a branding company in Fresno, but she came in with an internship program idea for low-income youth to teach them coding and how to build websites. And then businesses would pay reduced rates through her marketing agency for the youth to acquire experience on building websites and all the such. However, mental health was also something she really cared about and something she struggled with over the years. And so she was also simultaneously working on selling candles. And before you know it, now Monisha's been on Oprah, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and recently moved her business to Texas just because of how much success she's had in selling candles, but because of how much she understood the idea in the social entrepreneurial process and how well she connected to both customer and beneficiary. And I will note that this is something that Monisha really tapped into really well, was candles, there's nothing really missional about candles until you dive into kind of the therapeutic resting nature of candles. But you actually also focus on the mental health side through music and through experience on lighting a candle. And so on one end, she had customers that really cared about quality candles. And on the other end, she had customers that cared about, the personalized Spotify playlist they'd get, or the type of story or mental health resources that they would be connected to based on the candle that they bought. Which again, the virality of her business was fantastic to see in the middle of the pandemic, actually. So I'd mention that here because again, the original idea was an internship program that then morphed into solving a different problem, which was mental health through candles. Not to simplify that process, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying here. So next step here is building an MVP. Again, what is an MVP? Minimum viable product. And this is the most basic solution you can possibly imagine that technically solves the problem. And the goal here is to move fast. The goal isn't to be bad or terrible here. I will say the goal is for you to move fast. And because of the speed you'll be moving at, your MVP won't be the ultimate end product of your dreams. That would take too much time and it would be too long of a process at this stage. And again, the goal is to not have you waste time on something that isn't going to work or matter. We have a local entrepreneur who started an alternative dwelling unit business, an ADU process. And their business idea changed 8 times in 8 weeks, mainly because they were talking to 50 to 100 customers a week and realizing, would you put an ADU in your backyard? They started with Airbnbs, then they moved into Section 8, then they started affordable housing, and they went through various different ideas before they realized, oh, hey, I finally found a customer base that is willing to buy an ADU and put it in their backyard to generate additional income for them, but provide affordable housing in the Fresno housing market for them. And getting so much success, they were acquired by a San Francisco company that is now developing similar product in Fresno and across California as well. And again, but they didn't come to that without this really quick and fast process and understanding who is our customer base. I would say think skateboard and not car if you're solving the transportation issue. Yeah, like you'd love to build a Toyota Camry tomorrow, but in reality, you probably could have built a skateboard. And it's not the most ideal way to put this person's fire in their hair out, but it gets the job done. It may take them an hour to get to work rather than 15 minutes, but at the very least, you've solved this problem in some way, shape, or form. Where if you sell enough skateboards, then you can build a scooter. If you build enough scooters, you can build some mopeds, and eventually building a car, if that is your goal and dream along the way. And then finally, what is the purpose of an MVP? One, it's to learn the most about the customer's problem based on their actions. It's not just their words, I would say. And I would say this is pretty important to remember because this stage is really helpful to see if people will put their money where their mouth is. Again, actions always speak louder than words. And again, the goal here is the shortest amount of time possible to learn as much as you can about whether your solution solves the problem. So if you spent a year building your first version of the product or service that you're going to sell and you test one per week, you spend 1 week on each version of your MVP. You would, in theory, there's 52 chances here to learn and change your solution to be better and to solve the problem. On the flip side, if you only focused on one for 52 weeks, it's a whole year's process to figure out whether that works or doesn't work. And so again, there's a hidden key here that is helpful to know as you're trying to start a social enterprise. So most new businesses that fail don't get crushed by competition. The reality is, and it's not even that they run out of money, but most businesses that fail fall apart because their founder lost sense of momentum, they ran out of steam, and they decided to give up. And so the goal here is to move quickly with your MVP so that it really helps to maintain the sense of momentum and keep you and your team really focused on where you're going here. I think actually of a specific idea here and you guys might know the company Instacart, and maybe you've heard that and see it all over town now. Excuse me. But the founder of Instacart, I thought, was ingenious in what she did. And this was before we had any kind of delivery services back in the day. But the founder had an idea for an app that would provide a grocery delivery service on a regular basis. She could have spent months mocking a version of an app, spending tens of thousands of dollars building an app because we know how expensive apps are, or she could have spent a month trying to write out a 50-page business plan. But she knew that she probably wouldn't learn as much from those processes as she would talking to actual customers that needed it. So instead, she actually went to a single mother support group and offered to take their money and buy and deliver their groceries by hand. So how did she input the orders? In a very fancy way, right? She'd take a notepad to meetings and write down what they wanted on a piece of paper, and she'd keep a list. And you might be asking, well, what if someone changes their mind or they realize like, oh man, I forgot the oatmeal and milk on that list? How did she receive last minute order changes? Well, they would text her cell phone. Pretty simple way. And then how did she get feedback from her customers? Well, she actually watched their body language as she made deliveries and asked what they could have been done better and kept track of who kept using her and using those customers to inform her process. And by doing this, she learned an incredible amount about what they needed and the problem that she was solving for them in just a few weeks. She didn't need a lot of money, right? She didn't waste a ton of time doing this and building an app and buying special equipment. She just went and did this work herself. And eventually she built the app because she knew exactly what her customers needed. And she had worked with them so much that it actually informed the different aspects of the app and built Instacart to what it is today. Because she knew the features that were needed and which ones were unnecessary and distracting along the way. So again, goal, it could be to build an MVP within a week or pretty quickly, I would say. So the requirements for an MVP, we would say technically solve the business or entrepreneurial problem and then spending as little money as possible, which is the goal would be $100. It may be a little bit of embarrassing for you based on the idea in your mind, but again, the goal is to at least solve the problem. And the goal is to learn based on their behavior. It's not to impress them with the bells and whistles that you might be thinking are needed in this process. And again, I don't mean to take this lighthearted approach and calling it embarrassing along the way. But again, you might have these goals and dreams for your business that you might think, why would I ever do this? But the goal here is to learn about the problem that you're trying to solve. And then step 5, improve your MVP. Now that you built your first version, we're going to encourage you, take that MVP to your customers, people who are a problem you are solving, and let them use it. You want to see how they interact with it, just hand it to them. Don't give them instructions and let their body language. They might be super confused and that might tell you like, oh man, this needs a manual or an explanation, or it might be intuitive and they might be able to use it right away. We would say, listen to what they say, watch their facial expressions, see which parts are the hardest for them to figure out. And at the end of the day, whether it actually solves their problem. Again, they might be a little confused because of maybe how terrible it is or how simple it is or how complicated it is, but that should inform what changes along the way and improving your MVP. And so you want to take that feedback from what they say, what you observe, and use that to make improvements the next week. You want to balance what they say, what they do, and the insights that come to your mind. And we would say, keep iterating, keep cycling through this process of testing and improvement. And now we get to, when is this no longer an MVP? When is it ready to sell? Well, it's pretty complicated. We would say you offer to sell it to someone and they say yes, right? And in all seriousness, I would say don't overcomplicate this. Don't get stuck on terminology here. MVP, beta testing, version testing. There's all these terminologies, but I would say keep it simple. Make something that people want and sell it to them. And so again, this being on the business side. And then finally, find more customers. This is where things start to get really exciting and have the potential to take off. Now that you've built something, customers are starting to pay for it. So it's time to find more customers. but how do I reach more people? How do I find more people who have this problem? You're going to want to find out a couple things. Where do these people hang out, either in person or online? You could ask, where are their eyeballs spending the most time? Who has their attention and why? What other networks could you connect to that have built trust? Because at CCT and in our work with leadership foundations, we very much believe in the power of networking and the power of networks to accomplish work together. And so this collaboration being really key to, one, working to solve and address specific problems, but two, also to scale your enterprise. And then finally I want to make sure I cover this point though, but there are a few ways you can do this. You can talk to existing customers, ask if they know anybody who might be interested in what you're selling. You can think about where your existing customers spend their time. You might notice some consistent trends. Maybe they all go to yoga on Friday mornings, and maybe that's where you should be too. Or maybe they go golfing at the local country club but they all care about locally sourced coffee or creating clean water in Thailand. Or maybe they all go to a specific church. And so maybe that's where you need to be as well. You can also think about who has your existing customers' attention and how you can get there and find more people like them. You see businesses these days use influencers, and with a lot of success. There's a reason for that, because the next generation, a lot of them are on Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok. I haven't quite been on those, but I know that's where the youth are. Social media, I just mentioned this here, but social media allows you to engage in conversations with potential customers. I would say use social media to have a two-way conversation. If you're using social media as like a megaphone, we would say you're doing it the wrong way. You really need to be having a conversation with your customers. It's not about what you always want to communicate to people, big numbers, big, right? But really, again, connecting with your customers and having a two-way conversation. You don't just want to talk out loud. And then finally, sales channels, which is just a fancy way of saying you want to build multiple roads to connect you and your customers. And so once you find more people with specific problems, how do you sell to them efficiently? How do you collect their money? And how do you tell the story of the impact you're having in community? So social media websites, local store consultants, these are all examples of sales channels. And with all that said, let's jump into some more SparkTank application questions that we feel like these steps are helpful in answering. The first one here being, describe your social enterprise and what it does in 1 to 2 sentences. We would say be sure to include your intended impact. By step 3 or 4, and definitely by this point in the process, you should be able to describe what your social enterprise is and what it does. But it's not always super easy or clear. So we actually take a phrase from co-founder of Bitwise, Irma Olguin, here in Fresno, but she uses something very simple that we think is very helpful in this process. She says, we do blank for blank who blank. We do product or service for this type of person who has this unique characteristic or problem. In the example of Instacart, we deliver groceries for working single mothers who don't have time to shop for all of their food their family needs that week. Or we clean work uniforms for chemical plant workers who are legally required to keep their clothes chemical and odor free. And so if you're stuck trying to summarize your social enterprise in a sentence or two, I would encourage you to use this framework because it's one of my favorites personally. But we also find it helpful to you along the way. Next up, this is what you are trying to figure out in steps 3, 4, 5, and 6 is how will you make money? Again, if you're going to be a business, we got to understand that you'll be making business. I do want to make this disclaimer though, is when we talk about social enterprise, usually we're looking for for-profit models, but there are also multiple nonprofit models that have revenue streams, right? So you could be a nonprofit that has a way to generate revenue. You just also take donations and grants on the side that support your enterprise. So again, you don't necessarily have to be a for-profit, but you do have to find a way to make money in a revenue stream that's not necessarily charity-based. Again, you should have a decent idea of this. It could change in the process, but at least having a clear idea helps us understand that you know how you're going to be sustainable and scalable over time. And there could be more than one way, and that's okay. Next question, how will you find customers and how will your customers find you? I find this question to be pretty self-explanatory, but where can you reach out to your customers in a setting where they'd be open to hearing about your product or service? And on the flip side, how will you create pathways to your customers to find you? So again, we're looking for your thought process and your craftiness on these. Have you sold any product or services yet? Again, this helps us see where you're at in your journey. It's okay if you haven't sold anything yet, but if you have, that's definitely a certain level of validation that the judges will be looking at. So try to make this a little bit more than yes or no question. Tell us a little bit more about why maybe you haven't, or maybe why you feel like you've had traction along the way. And then at what point are you at in your progress today? Have you talked to any potential customers? Have you made any sales? Again, we just want to know where you're at and what you've learned. It'd probably be a good idea to use the six-step process described here as part of your answer to help share where you are at in your progress. So again, just some encouragement here along the way. And then my final section is actually going to focus on the finance section here. And then I do want to transition into some Q&A time here at about 11:30 with you all. So the last section, again, finance. Money is critical to keeping your social enterprise alive. And since a few of the SparkTank applications deal with finances, let's jump into this. And we're going to cover a few different types of costs. And then I hopefully give you a helpful formula for your process as well. So the first one being cost per sale. In business terms, you will hear the term variable cost. But essentially, it's the cost it takes you to make a product or deliver your service one time. Again, I want to dispel this business jargon along the way. It's the materials, the time and hourly wages. It's the commission to salespeople that you pay. An example from your life, think of how much you pay for your gas. It's directly dependent on how much you drive. If you don't drive, your gas costs are zero. But if you're taking a 3-hour trip, then whatever variable time there that you took is the amount that you're going to pay for that gas to fill up again. Excuse me. And I would say this, I know we're spending a lot of time on like business finance side. In our experience, and the reason why we gear our workshops here is most times, and I get the sense from our group here, people know the problem that they want to focus on. And that's why they're choosing to come into the social business side. However, they may have the social side down, but we want to be as helpful as we can on both ends, but really understand we know who we're building these workshops for. And oftentimes business is where most people have questions or murkiness on about their social enterprise. Again, this goes up and down depending on how many units you sell. In business terms, there's a phrase called economies of scale. The more you sell of something, the less it costs the business, right? Think of when you buy in bulk, it sometimes costs you less. Think of Costco. Sales price should be greater than the cost it costs you, or else you're paying your customer to use your product or service. And so I don't want to make that so cut and dry, but again, it's something that a lot of businesses struggle with, and realizing like, hey, I don't understand why my credit card bill keeps going up if I'm selling a ton of stuff, only to realize that after they calculated the variable cost, they realized that their costs are actually more than their actual sales price. So something to keep in mind here. And again, something we'd encourage folks is to consider paying yourself in this process. We would say it's nice doing things for free the first 5 or 6 times, but after you do it 100 times, it doesn't feel as good anymore. And so the consideration here is to pay yourself. Some founders will pay themselves whatever rate they would pay someone else to do the job. And then when they can afford to hire someone else, then they transfer that pay to the next person. So we really do feel like this is a great sustainable practice to include here. Even if you're not necessarily taking a paycheck or money from the profits in the beginning. The next category here is ongoing cost. This is fixed cost. This is basically the cost to stay open. Renting office space, insurance, renting equipment, machinery, and salaries. I'll include in the email I sent to you all a spreadsheet that can help you make a list and calculate these. But you can also Google a list of fixed costs that might be more comprehensive than mine here. For example, from your life, think of how much you pay in car insurance. It basically stays the same every month, just so you can have your car. You can drive 2 miles, you can drive 2,000, but your car insurance that month probably stays the same. And I would say that this actually stays the same as well, no matter how many units you sell. So your rent probably doesn't change whether you sell 2,000 brownies or whether you sell 0 brownies. And so that's why we would call these fixed costs or ongoing cost. We really would encourage you to get these as close to 0 as possible at the beginning. Skip the fancy things and just go with what you need to test your idea. That's why you often hear entrepreneurs say that they started their business out of their garage or in their home, and they just had a ton of boxes of inventory before they actually had enough money to justify getting an office space. Because again, that money early on in your process, because you don't have a limited time, energy, and money, is really valuable to sustaining the work that you're doing and not paying for a building that you might not need on the forefront. And I would say, don't forget to factor these in to your fixed cost, or excuse me, into the cost that you sell something for. And I'm going to give you guys a calculation here that's pretty simple called break-even point. This is when you stop losing money. Once you pass this threshold, you start making money. But the question here, again, ditching the business jargon, is how many units do I have to sell in order to cover all of my fixed and variable cost? There is a formula here. You'll start in the parentheses by taking the sales price and then subtracting the variable cost, and then you'll divide your fixed costs by the number you got in the parentheses. And if you're great at math, you probably followed me here, and maybe math isn't your strong suit, and so you're trying to figure out, like, what does this mean? Well, I would say that you want to make sure you round up to your highest number, because you don't sell 67.3 units of something, you sell 68, right? So something to consider here. But let's do a little math here. If you sell something for $100 and it costs you $80 to deliver this product or service, and your fixed costs per month are $85, what is your break-even point, right? And I've done the math already, but it's 43, right? And if you did that in your head, fantastic job. I would say that the exact number here is 42.25 in this example, but you can't sell less than 1 unit, so the unit is 43 to break even. And this is the least amount that we could sell without losing money. And so we hope that this equation is helpful to you, and you can always play with this, right? If your break-even point is just crazy high, or you feel is unrealistic, you might realize, like, oh man, I need to sell my product or service for more money, right? Or you need to find a way to reduce your fixed and variable cost. And this is why we come back to early on in the beginning, you really want to limit these fixed costs and find a way to provide something at a lower rate than maybe this $80 rate. And you can always Google break-even point to figure this out in more detail, but this is the simplest definition that we could come up with. But you will receive a spreadsheet to help you calculate these in your process. And then finally, let's get into the finance-related questions in the SparkTank application. 1, how much does it cost you to produce your product or service, and how much can you sell it for? Here we're looking for cost per unit or per sale, and something we've been calling variable cost. Look back at the slide on cost per sale, or you can Google variable cost examples. The second question is asking how much you can charge for it, and with whatever number you come up with, give us an idea on why you came up with that number, right? Not just because 100's a pretty round number. How much money do you need to get started? This is important, again, because this sometimes is as much subjective math, can't speak, excuse me. This sometimes is as much subjective art as it is math. There is no right answer here. We're just looking at your thought process here. Sometimes entrepreneurs come in saying, I need $50,000 to start my business. And after you realize what you really need and what you don't need, they might need only $6,000 to get started tomorrow. And so this is our goal, to really get to understand whether you understand what you need, and maybe what are bells and whistles that can wait down the road. Again, think through the MVP and what that will cost you, what the fixed costs are up front, and how much you're going to need in the bank to potentially pay people if you're not going to be doing this yourself. And then finally, it's a balance between not wanting, I would say, to blow a bunch of money up front on an idea that you haven't fully tested yet. And while you also want to make sure that you don't run out of money because you're trying to cut different corners along the way. So just keep this in mind. And then finally, again, you're submitting an application for investment into your business. And so we'd like to hear from you. If you were to receive an investment from Spark Tank, what would you use it for? Similar to the last question, but now we want to see the actions you're planning to take with the money you would potentially receive. And then finally, I would say there's a couple questions that don't always specifically tie to the 6 steps, but I know we've covered a lot today. We're almost done here. And so I do want to cover the last couple questions here that don't necessarily fit into the previous categories. I would say these are all optional questions, so you don't have to answer them. But if you have any interesting answers, we do want to hear them. The first one here is, have you tried starting a business before? If yes, how did it go? How did you grow as an entrepreneur? Have you been a manager at a similar industry? Any of that is helpful. So tell us about your entrepreneurial spirit, your history, and maybe some of the experience with selling things. The next question here is, if you have any advisors or partners and other people that will be helping, but that are not part of your founding team. This could be a mentor, a business professor, etc., but someone that is actually part of your process here. Though most of these will be ideas, we'd be curious to know whether you've created a legal entity. Are you a sole proprietor, an LLC, a C Corp, S Corp, a nonprofit, L3C, B Corp? There's a lot of designations out there, but help us understand where you're at point in time. And then the final question here, if there is any other information or analysis you would like us to know, you can include that as an addendum or a simple narrative, whether it's financial analysis, market analysis. But again, this information isn't key or core to the application, but if you do have it, we'd like to see it. And I would say to use this process to help your social enterprise move forward, and with all of the questions, just write your current theory on what you will work on. Because again, we don't expect you to have it all figured out, but we want to understand that you do have a good starting point for where you are. And so with all I've said today, I do want to say thank you for being part of the presentation today. I do want to transition into some Q&A time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here really quick to see if there are any questions in the chat. But I guess I would ask here, does anybody have any questions here? And I do see a note from Daryl. Anything I feel you can find your customers would be in specific Facebook groups, which social media is very powerful. Well, any questions from the group on anything we've shared so far?
So the pitch day, it says, you said the 15th, right?
The deadline for that, or the pitch day?
The actual pitch day.
Yeah, so it is March 15th. It will be hosted via Zoom, just because of the trends with COVID here. And it will be a private pitch day where you will actually be a live panel of judges at that time. If you're accepted, you will receive all that information for that. I'll also schedule some time to prepare you for that pitch day as well.
Right. I'm just trying to, I have a new job, figure out, the timing of it. So
Yeah,
that's a weekday, right?
it is a weekday. So,
So
we will
is it possible to get something after 4?
potentially, absolutely. We'll send you
I
again.
know I'd have to get in first, but
Yeah, again, if you're accepted, we'll communicate with you to schedule that time. But it would be on that day. And usually I believe we run we usually run the pitch competition from like 2 to 6, depending on people's schedules.
thanks.
That's a good question. Any other questions, folks?
One more.
Go ahead, Rukmini.
Can two people present together or does it need to be one person?
No, absolutely. It could be your founding team. It could be more.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So that's totally fine. Y'all don't have questions. Y'all make me feel like I did a great job explaining everything. I'm going to share my screen really quick with you all. Let me do that. So just how to apply for Spark Tank. Again, here's the calendar. Oop, if my screen shares. Deadline, as we mentioned before, is February 23rd by 5 p.m. I will be emailing you all a link to apply where you will upload your documents. At the same time, you will also find that link on our website at cctfresno.org. Again, I'm going to email all this information to you. And from there, the judges will review business plans and you will receive acceptance to pitch by March 4th, which we will then schedule a time for you to pitch at Spark Tank on March 15th. We will note that all funding is reliant on you successfully completing the Social Enterprise Academy, which is a 2-month accelerator program here. You will have access to your funding there as we're helping you structure and start your idea. But again, it does require successful completion of the Social Enterprise Academy, and more information can be given to you once you're accepted there. At the same time, part of our goal is to then launch you into community. And so on June 16th, we do have a Social Enterprise Expo where we will feature you and your business ideas to our constituency here at CCT. But with anything, I would always say you can reach out to me. My name is Carlos Huerta. My email's there. You can always find me on LinkedIn as well if you'd like to connect. But you are always welcome to schedule a time if you would like. Maybe you don't want to answer the question here on Zoom, but we can always schedule a chance to chat more and maybe bounce some ideas as to what you're working on. We want to be as helpful as we can in the process. But I'll stop sharing my screen one more time and give the group one last chance. Are there any questions that may be pending here? Fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. I do hope this workshop was helpful to you in your process. Again, if you have questions or have a pending comment, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect with you. And I look forward to seeing some, if not all, of your applications in this process. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos.
Bye-bye.